Welcome to the Restricted Handling Podcast. This is what's been going on in China in the past 24 hours. Let's start with the political core. The Communist Party just put fresh numbers on the board for its anti-corruption campaign, and they're staggering even by China standards. Nearly 1 million people punished in 2025. That's not just cleaning house, that's pressure washing the entire structure. Senior provincial officials, military officers, university heads, state-owned enterprise executives. This isn't about a few bad apples. Xi Jinping is reinforcing again and again that loyalty is non-negotiable. Earlier this month, he personally described corruption as severe and complex, which is party speak for this is permanent. If you're inside the system, the message is clear. Keep your head down, stay aligned, or you're replaceable. What's changed since yesterday is how openly this is being framed as continuity rather than correction. There's a growing acknowledgement, even inside Chinese discourse, that Xi isn't undoing Deng Xiaoping's legacy. He's finishing it. Deng never built strong institutional guardrails against a dominant leader. He built weak norms that worked only as long as everyone played along. Xi stopped playing along. Term limits are gone. Ideology is back front and center, and personal authority is now the organizing principle. This isn't a sudden swerve. It's the road Deng paved, just driven faster and with fewer speed bumps. Economically, we're still in the same uneasy place we were yesterday, but with more texture. Yes, China technically hit its 5% growth target. Yes, exports carried the load. But now senior planners are openly admitting the model is off balance. Strong supply, weak demand keeps coming up. And that's not a slogan, it's a diagnosis. Investment fell again. Consumption is soft. Retail sales growth slowed to a crawl. Real estate remains the dead weight we talked about yesterday, and there's no sign it's coming back to play the role it used to. The new wrinkle today is policy intent. Beijing is signaling a longer-term pivot rather than a quick fix. Officials are talking about a 5-year plan focused on boosting domestic demand, consolidating industries, and retiring excess capacity. There's even discussion of a national mergers and acquisitions fund to force weaker players into consolidation. That sounds technocratic, but the subtext is political. Beijing wants control without panic. No big stimulus bazooka, no sugar high, just enough support to keep things stable while the system adjusts. Meanwhile, the export engine is still redlining, and the human cost of that pivot is becoming clearer. Yesterday, we talked about how China simply shifted exports from the US to everywhere else. Today's reporting puts faces to that strategy. Salespeople are working longer hours for smaller orders, chasing clients in lower-income markets, extending credit, absorbing risk, and making less money doing it. Industrial profits are down double digits. This is growth by volume, not by value. It works until it doesn't, and Beijing knows it can't rely on this forever. That's where trade as leverage comes in, and today adds some sharp examples. Rare earth magnets, critical for EVs, renewables, and military systems, are now firmly in the geopolitical toolkit. Exports to Japan dipped late last year after diplomatic tensions, and Beijing followed through with new restrictions on dual-use items. Japanese buyers rushed to stockpile, clearly assuming this isn't the last move. Shipments to the U.S. remain well below last year's levels, even after a temporary pause in some controls. The signal is subtle but unmistakable. Access is conditional and politics matter. Europe is feeling that same pressure. The EU is preparing to force Chinese suppliers out of critical infrastructure like telecom networks and solar systems. Huawei and ZTE are the obvious targets. Beijing's response has been loud. Accusations of protectionism, warnings about damaged investment confidence, but the direction in Europe hasn't changed. If anything, it's hardening. Yesterday we talked about China opening tabs at new bars. Europe is now checking IDs at the door. China's external risks aren't just economic, though. One of the most sobering updates today comes out of Afghanistan. A suicide bombing hit a Chinese-run restaurant in a heavily guarded part of Kabul, killing a Chinese national and several Afghans. Islamic State claimed responsibility and explicitly cited China's treatment of Uyghurs. That's not random, that's ideological targeting. It highlights a growing vulnerability. Chinese citizens are increasingly visible abroad, but China doesn't have the global security infrastructure to protect them the way the US learned, expensively, to do over decades. Southeast Asia adds another layer. Chinese nationals are still turning up trapped in scam compounds, particularly in Cambodia. Beijing is now publicly pressing Cambodian authorities harder, warning that these incidents are damaging bilateral relations. These criminal networks thrive in governance gray zones, and China is getting pulled into the mess whether it likes it or not. It's the dark side of overseas engagement that never makes it into glossy investment presentations. Africa popped back onto the radar today, too, in a quieter but telling way. In Nigeria, testimony in the long-running Mambila hydropower fraud case suggested that major Chinese financial agencies may never have been formally involved, despite years of assumptions. Even if that limits direct Chinese liability, it doesn't erase the reputational hit. Big infrastructure projects linked, fairly or not, to Chinese money continue to attract corruption allegations, political backlash, and legal drama. On the military side, the tempo hasn't slowed. New satellite imagery shows renewed construction at Antelope Reef in the Paracel Islands. This is familiar territory: dredging, land reclamation, and the slow conversion of reefs into hardened military outposts. Runways, piers, radar, missiles, electronic warfare assets, the full kit. Beijing still calls this defensive. Everyone else sees expanded surveillance and control across the South China Sea. Around Taiwan, today's update builds directly on yesterday's theme of normalization. Analysts looking at recent PLA exercises are saying the quiet part out loud: surprise is basically gone. During late December drills, U.S. Friller and Japanese forces reacted immediately. High-end surveillance assets rerouted, sensors lit up, data flowed. Chinese analysts are now arguing the PLA has to stop planning around hiding and start planning around operating under constant observation. That means jamming, deception, resilience, and shaping what the other side thinks it's seeing. Less movie magic, more chess match where everyone sees the board. That military reality feeds into rising political friction. Beijing issued sharp warnings toward Philippine officials over South China Sea messaging, accusing them of provocation. At the UN, Chinese diplomats leaned hard on World War II history, warning against Japan's alleged drift toward militarism. These aren't offhand comments. They're deliberate narrative weapons, tying current security disputes to historical memory. Thanks so much for listening and for being part of the RH community. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribing, leaving a quick 5-star review, or sharing it with someone you know makes a huge difference. It's how this network will grow. We also publish a daily written intel brief on Substack, where you'll find even deeper coverage of Russia and China, along with insights on Iran, the Middle East, and the DPRK.